Good evening. Um, exactly a month ago, almost a month ago, on December 23rd, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2334 on the Jewish settlements. After the United States abstained from the vote and the other 14 members voted in favor. This was the first Security Council resolution to include a firm condemnation of settlements since 1980. It raises concern about potential harmful consequences for Israel, and I want to discuss with you, with my three guests here, the practical implications of this resolution. So my guests are the ambassador of the European Union in Israel, Mr. Lars Faberg Andersen, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Dr. Daphna Shraga, former principal legal officer at the United Nations Office of Legal Affairs, and Dr. Einat Wilf, former MK in Israel. So my first question is about the legal aspects of the resolution. The resolution says that the settlements have no legal validity, are in a flagrant violation of international law, calls upon all states, calls about Israel to stop the settlement activity, calls upon all states to distinguish between the territory of the State of Israel and the territories occupied since 1967. Now, I would like to know what is the practical meaning of these stipulations? Maybe we'll start with you. What does it mean from the UN system, other institutions, and then hear a bit about other impacts, and especially from the EU's perspective, what does it mean with regard to activities in the settlements, activities that, or businesses that have branches in the settlements? What does it mean in practical means?
I will begin probably with three very quick comments. The first one is that the declaration or the statement that settlement activities or settlement as such are a flagrant violation of international law. There's nothing new there. This is something the Security Council has already said on a number of occasions, so that is the declaratory part. It's not that the Security Council is constituting or legislating, it is just that it's reiterating the legal position which has already been accepted by the UN for quite some time. The most important part, of course, is the calling upon Israel. In fact, is demanding Israel to cease immediately and completely, and I should say, if I may, that this is probably the one part which is legally binding, one of the few paragraphs that are legally binding, and basically this is a demand upon Israel to cease completely and immediately all settlement activities.
And Israel does not do that.
Well, there's nothing that has changed. Israel is in a violation for a number of years already. In fact, this is something that goes back to the 79, 80, where the settlement activities have already been described as a flagrant violation. In fact, this is already from the Geneva Convention. So that's not the point, because this is a situation of a violation. The other, calling upon other states, this is the part which is probably less legally binding, the practical implications upon for third states, and therefore all the institution is to make the distinction between, in every dealing with Israel, to make a distinction between the territory of Israel and territory of the occupied territories. But what distinction, what dealings, this is really left for the discretionary power of states. So in that perspective, this is probably less legally binding. I should also say that there is a distinction in the language when you say that the Security Council demands, so this is clearly a legally binding language. And when the Security Council is only calling upon this, has customarily been looked at as something which is less than fully legally binding.
So, Ambassador Faberg Andersen, will the European Union, despite the fact that it's only maybe a recommendation, but do more to distinguish between the territory of the State of Israel and the territories? And if so, what? What would it do?
I want to say that this resolution, I think, is very reflective of the European Union's point of view and policies when it comes to settlements. Over and above the legal question, which was just touched upon before, I think there are two additional reasons which are also reflected in the resolution, which are the reason why we are very skeptical and against settlements. They make a two-state solution more difficult to implement, and it breaks down the trust between the parties in pursuing negotiations. And that's the reason why our view remains that we cannot accept any changes to the 67 lines which had not been agreed by the parties. This is important to underline because this is not only a legal issue, it's also a political issue, and that is reflected in the resolution as well. When it comes to operative paragraph 5 in the resolution, it says that member states, and here it's talking about the member states of the United Nations, which is a bit more than the 28 EU member states, should in their dealings distinguish between Israel proper within its 67 lines and the territories. This is actually what the EU is doing already in a number of ways. I think you are familiar with them. Already when we signed the association agreement, which gave the Israel privileged access to the European internal market, we made an exception for settlers or settlement products. They are welcome on the internal market, but not at concessional customs rates like products emanating from Israel proper. The same is with the so-called indication of origin or labeling issue, where we are saying that we cannot accept that products that come from the territories are labeled made in Israel because they are not, or territories are not part of Israel as we see it. So this is, I think, a concrete example of what the resolution is talking about when it says that you need to distinguish between the territories and Israel proper in your dealings.
So it won't make any difference to the current position? You will just continue, or does the resolution mean that there will be some kind of change or shift in the...
No, I don't think that, I mean, we need to make any changes. We are already implementing I think our understanding of the paragraph 5. Now, I mean, this is a resolution that has been adopted under Chapter 6. I mean, so it's not mandatory for member states to do these. So this is a sort of a moral encouragement, but one which we are abiding by in the EU already.
Thank you. Einat, what is your take about the legal implications of the resolution?
First of all, I think we should use certain interpretations of this resolution to our benefit. First and foremost, the embassies in West Jerusalem, not only the American one. What this resolution did is distinguish very sharply, very forcefully between Israel within the Green Line and the territories beyond it. It did so, remarkably, also with respect to Jerusalem, which is not something that has been done before. Effectively, a legitimate interpretation of 2334 would be that the United Nations Security Council essentially acknowledged that the whole fiction of Jerusalem as a separate area is dead, and that there's no dispute whatsoever about the fact that the western side of Jerusalem is Israeli territory, and legitimizes Israeli claims to have its capital there. This provides a legal interpretation, for example, for all embassies to move their embassies there. If ambassador here continues to be in Ramat Gan rather than in Jerusalem, that's pure hypocrisy. Because to tell Israel and the Jews you have no claims east of the Green Line, but then take no action that legitimates what is clearly undisputed west of the Green Line, that is pure hypocrisy. The same with respect to Arab maximalist claims west of the Green Line. The resolution tells Israel you cannot have what's east of it. I have not heard the European Union or the Security Council say anything about Palestinian Arab maximalist claims west of the Green Line in the form of the right of return.
Thank you. We have 3 minutes, I must say. So, Daphna, very shortly, do you also see the resolution as re-establishing or strengthening the position with regard to West Jerusalem?
I think that the problem now has been exacerbated by the fact that we have a basic law that now declares Jerusalem as a whole as a capital of Israel. So I think that probably would have been the case until that law, or until Israel has united, quote unquote, Jerusalem. The problem is that now when you say Jerusalem, now there's really no distinction. From an Israeli point of view, there's no distinction, because Jerusalem as a whole is now the capital of Israel.
Reinforce our position with regard to West Jerusalem, in your view.
But I'm talking about West. Now there east and the west, okay, is considered to be from Israel point of view, Jerusalem.
Yes.
So any transfer of the embassy, of any embassy to Jerusalem, even it is West Jerusalem that comes to the same. This would have been proper, I think, until 1967, because then there was no question of East Jerusalem. But now Israel has said East and West is the same. For Israel, both of them are Jerusalem, and this is the capital of Israel. So whether you are in the East, in the West, in the North, and the South, this is Jerusalem. I think that that is the problem now.
Okay, and a quick question. We don't have much time. The focus is this two-state solution. You also spoke about that. Does that mean that in practice, there's a difference between settlement activity in the settlement blocks and parts of East Jerusalem in comparison to isolated settlements that are more, let's say, problematic for a two-state solution? Or is it from the EU perspective the same, everything is the same, it's all beyond the 67 line, and you don't make such differentiations?
I think in principle it's the same, legally speaking. But of course, when it comes to the question of a final status solution, as we have said many times, we can agree to anything that the parties can agree to in free negotiations. So we would also be able to agree to a formula where the so-called settlement blocks, it's a little unclear exactly what they are, would be incorporated into Israel as part of the final status solution. So this, I don't think, is the point. The point is that what we have seen during Prime Minister Netanyahu's governance here is a massive expansion of settlements, and a very substantial part of it being outside the settlement blocks. That's what we just heard also today, I think in a panel where you were present. So I think there's an issue that goes much beyond the settlement blocks. It's not only in the settlement blocks that the construction is taking place.
That's what I'm asking. But would you focus on, is everything the same from your point of view, or would you put more emphasis on building outside the settlement blocks?
No, in principle it's the same. But obviously, when you're talking politically about it, we know that there are suggestions for incorporation of the settlement blocks, but we are not there yet. I mean, once that agreement has been reached, we'll be the first to accept that. But, you can't sell the skin before you have shot the bear, in a sense. So you need to reach that agreement before that can be accepted. And until that point, there's no difference between East Jerusalem and the rest.
So in the minute we have left, I would like to talk about the repercussions of this decision for negotiations. It seems to me that the language is stricter and more problematic in terms of reaching an agreement in comparison to 242, which was more flexible, talking about secure and recognized boundaries. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. This resolution essentially overturns 242 because it does not give Israel any legitimate claim east of the Green Line, essentially saying that the idea that Israel will give territory for peace is dead, because the idea is that Israel doesn't have anything to give because it's not Israel's. And this is where it actually makes an agreement ever harder. To be so naive as to say, we will agree, we will accept whatever the sides agree, but then fall so clearly on one side, making an agreement ever so harder to achieve, that is really another demonstration of why an intervention that does not understand that at the core of the conflict is continued Arab maximalist demands for all of Palestine from the river to the sea, that is, to be kind, not helpful.
So unfortunately, we ran out of time. We could talk for much longer. Thank you very much for coming and for showing your idea. Thank you.